We have Tom Shinners here. He's the CEO of Infinite Wireless. Tom and I connected via he's your VP now.
Yeah.
Mike Millimau is making a step up and moving up the ranks, and he's leading the charge now. So Mike introduced myself to Tom after we had been working together and getting familiar. I went through some certifications with Infinite Wireless, which were some of the best put together, deliberate, and easy to access. I think they make it really easy for partners. But before I start rambling, as I tend to do, I'm going to hand it over to Tom to give himself an introduction, as well as kind of a high-level intro to Infinite Wireless before we start jumping in.
Sure. Thanks, Daniel. So my background, I've spent the last 25, 30 years in IT and tech. Been in a number of different industries. I got introduced to it way back when I started working for insurance. Actually, if we go all the way back when I was working at Ryder Truck Rental, and we were using legacy old IBM CRT systems, and I got the knack for designing and building around sealed systems that don't have a lot of flexibility and capability. And so I was very interested in the IT space. I went into the insurance industry and started working in a customer service center where we got trained, and then every month we'd roll a new team. Back then, your PC was your PC. So every time we'd bring in new teams, we'd do a mix of people. And so I got very in tune with the IT team and putting everything out and moving stuff around and reconnecting. And from there, it launched into really building PCs, doing a lot of white label, doing network design, network implementation. Worked for a couple of different companies, had my own agency for several years, focusing on carrier services, circuits, voice services, infrastructure, before we even called them managed service providers, doing a lot of that type of stuff, outsourcing to companies and customers from security standpoint, infrastructure monitoring. Fast forward into 2000, everybody was worried about Y2K and sold a lot of hardware and gear, specifically around that time frame, and redesigns because everybody was worried that nothing was going to work. Then you go forward a few more years and became an early adopter from what we now call UCaaS, but at the time it was voice over IP over internet, or VoIP systems, and then voice over IP over internet. And was an early adopter, built a couple of systems, working with a couple of companies, taking advantage of moving into the cloud, which has become the general practice today. I would say over the last over 10 years, I've been very focused in that space as SD-WANs come out, kind of leading edge on a lot of things, and realizing that engineering and networks and network design and overlays, and even from an internet perspective, when you get the idea that everything is an address to an address, a lot of different ways to be able to create that and scale it. Get to within the last couple of years and worked at Windstream and had a lot of customers who were having problems. Everybody moves into backup and cellular backup, or LTE, and started becoming a major overage problem for a lot of customers. And also based on location area, as we all know, working with our cell phones, you could be sitting in one spot and you could have 2 bars, then 3 bars, then 4 bars. So it's a very fluctuating technology. So I started looking into how do we combat that? Is there a product set that fits a multi-carrier aspect around there? And hence Infinite Wireless. I started working with SIMO. They've been around since 2008. They built a product set that literally will scan across multiple carriers and provides data connectivity. They originally started on voice and decided we don't want to do voice, we want to do data. Not as many issues around that, especially from governmental entities and requirements around all those. So they went full in and were a consumer-focused, driven organization for many years. Started working with them about 2 years ago to design and build out and really focus on going after the B2B side of the business and going after businesses to provide this service, really going after a lot of these product sets that are built today, where you plug in SIM cards, looking at security, looking at the multi-carrier aspect to be able to embed that capability within a device. Brought us where we're at today, then getting introduced to you and working with partners across the country. So, kind of unique situation currently within our product set. We have capability with over 300 LTE carriers around the globe, and over 140 plus countries and more territories. I think we're up to 165 or 170 total area locations across the globe where we could potentially provide connectivity from an LTE perspective across a multi-carrier backbone.
We had a conversation prior to getting on this podcast. I think it was last week, and we seemed to share some of those similar stories of a bit of a meandering approach to getting where we're at and having our hands in. I mean, certainly yours is far more technically involved and has a greater depth than mine does, but I think we share a certain commonality geared toward solving problems and getting involved and figuring out how things work and being a part of designing a better system in our respective worlds. I think that shines through in what you guys are doing, and you have some of the easiest to understand and practical solutions that are easy to have conversations about. And, you mentioned a lot of the underlying tech behind it. And I want to put that into terms of some use cases and product examples that would be easily recognizable. I did get a head start. I don't typically do really very much prep at all for these podcasts. But in this case, I got my hands on one of your products following the certification. And this one here is, I don't know if you could see it through the backgrounds, but this is the Infinite Wireless 4G LTE Solus Lite. We call it the Puck, right? And This is the multi-carrier hotspot that is equipped with the SIMO technology, the patented technology for the vSIM that Tom was talking about. I can easily describe the differences between a vSIM, eSIM, and a traditional physical SIM, but I want to let Tom go ahead and talk about that, and then maybe we'll get into some of the use cases, and I can discuss the results of the testing that I did.
Yeah, absolutely. So today, for most devices today that are connected to LTE, right? So we talk LTE and 5G. A lot of people mix those up. They're different technologies, but in like a standard iPhone, Android that has 5G and 4G capability. Within those product sets, up until probably 2 years ago, you saw a lot of going back to the carrier, going whoever your cell phone provider is. SIM cards were placed inside the devices. There was a SIM slot. You push those in there. The issue with those is that once a card is printed, it's read-only memory. Everything that's on there is on there. You can never make a change to the card. Switching carriers required you to take that card, take it out, put another card in. You also saw with carriers where they may have made an upgrade or a change to their network, different types of capabilities on the back end. And so they, for years, I mean, it used to be, oh, well, we'll send you a SIM card. And then, here's the instructions, and you have the little SIM tool, and you pop the SIM card out, put the new SIM card in. Changing carriers does the same thing. We have migrated in the industry on a number of devices to where they call it eSIM or electronic SIM. You may also hear it referred to as iSIM or included or embedded. Instead of the actual physical SIM card that goes into the device, that card is now embedded within the device. So like iPhone 15, iPhone 16, a number of Android devices now no longer require you to put a SIM card into the device. But again, it will only align. Each individual eSIM module will only connect to a single carrier. We've seen in the industry now that there's a lot of companies out there that are claiming multi-carrier SIMs, which are, again, physical SIMs that come in 3 different sizes, right? There's the small, the medium, and the large. Most of us are real familiar with the large ones, but they've scaled back on some of those as well. Those particular SIMs are an aggregator type product set where a company is bringing in multiple carriers, aligning multiple things that can go on the front of that SIM card, and then they program it based on the programming, because it's got the profiles for a large number of carriers. They can align that particular SIM card with particular carrier. In all 3 of those instances, we think of it as such that any device that's connecting to the internet from an LTE or 5G perspective, it's a one-to-one relationship, right? So a SIM card, no matter if it's a physical or an embedded SIM, that has a one-to-one relationship with whatever carrier it's connected. In the multi-carrier SIM products, it's still a one-to-one, but there's a large number of information that they could reprogram that chip or realign it to another carrier, but it takes that instance from an individual to be able to go in and redirect that or reconnect it to another carrier. Get into our world, the virtual SIM, so literally using cloud-based as a service, since we love the AAS today with everything as a service, right? UCaaS, CCaaS, video conferencing as a service, which we're all familiar with. We've moved in the industry away from having premise-based type gear that handles all of these things. You think about back in the day when we used to do video conference rooms and phone systems and all those things were on site. The move to the cloud has been drastically embraced. Three things that come from that. One is that we can make a lot of changes to the product set to a wide customer base in real time or in very short time frame. And once we make a change on any of those infrastructures, then that's available to everybody across the board. SIMO approached it from the very similar standpoint. So the virtual SIM is literally using cloud-based servers that we have SIM, for lack of a better term, kind of like SIM farms or SIM capability and as a service model. And then we can align any SIM card with any individual device that's in the field that's connected on the back end of the platforms. In simplistic terms, it's the ability to literally be able to leverage any SIM card from any environment, anywhere from a global perspective, depending upon plan, with any particular device that's associated and has the correct chipset and module that can connect on the back end. And then we use AI and algorithms on the back end to be able to align with the best carrier, the best connection within a particular territory based on plan and capability.
Very, very well done and in-depth. I'm glad I handed it over to you to describe that. Mine would have been about, I don't know, 30 words, but you think you did a great job there.
Thanks.
Making it broken down onto a both colloquial as well as technical level. I'll add a couple little things to that. From a terms of a management standpoint on that, we're not going to talk about the physical SIMs because they're on their way out, but talking about an eSIM, and that's a great advancement. But still, even with something like that, if you're talking about an organization with business processes or devices or IoT devices or individuals or, bless you, road warriors or truck drivers, whoever's crossing state lines or moving across geographic territories or navigating in and out of well-covered areas and not so well-covered areas in terms of connection, you're still, even though you're able to switch that carrier, need to go through the manual process of switching that on the back end. And you also have to have the knowledge and awareness of who is going to be the best carrier in that area. And what you're saying is with SIMO and the vSIM, it's all done for you. It's all automated through algorithms and AI and through the data centers. And I experienced this firsthand, and I had an inkling of understanding on the technology, and I wanted to test it. So I live on Long Island, New York, and I have Verizon as my cell phone carrier. My wife has AT&T, and she likes to rag on me because she tends to get better service than I do in a lot of places. Not always, but in particular, I drive on the LIE, which is the Long Island Expressway. I'm in Farmingdale, so that's around exit 44-ish. But my parents live all the way out in Manorville, and they're at exit 70. So on my way back and forth from there all the time, I tend to run into what I call a dead zone or a rough patch between around exit 53 to about all the way up to 70, where I have issues with connecting. So I'm always playing either like a YouTube video, listening to a podcast on there, whether it's like, Huberman Lab or something like that, or I'm streaming Spotify. And I'd have issues, especially when I went to go change, maybe fast forward or change to a different station, a different song. It would just get stuck in that buffering wheel of death for a long period of time if I'm able to connect at all. Or if I'm calling my parents and saying, hey, can you enter the gate code because that thing never works? Can you let me in? And I'm not able to connect to them. So I wanted to put it to the test. And my wife and I were driving out to take some family photos for Christmas over at Prosser Pines, which is around exit 67 or so. Long story short, I was able to stream while on the Solace Light hotspot a YouTube video the entire time with absolutely zero service interruptions, able to skip back and forth through YouTube videos, change the video, browse with absolutely zero buffering, zero service issues whatsoever, while she played Spotify through my Apple CarPlay and my RAV4 and was getting snagged on changing songs and getting buffered. So it solved that problem very easily. Now, that's on a personal note, and these are available to consumers. But if you're talking about businesses, maybe it's a service-based business, right? So I was just talking to a company just recently that has trucks that go out and they service clients all across Long Island. It's service trucks that go out. Now, if those guys are sending out trucks that are crossing over that area constantly, and they're having issues communicating back to the home office or to the clients and letting them know, hey, here's my my ETA, or think about a myriad of business problems you could have. You can have connection issues taking payment on a tablet. If you're doing home estimates, you need equipment that you need connectivity for. These are all problems that are very realistically and simply solved by something like the 4G Solus Puck. And this is just the 4G. There's actually great 5G coverage here on Long Island. And that, I know that's not all over the place, but can you reflect on that? Give me what your thoughts are, as well as talk about the differences between the Solus Lite 4G and the LTE versus the 5G Solus.
Yeah. So we do have a puck that was developed with 5G. I would say probably 70% of the time it's got a 5G and 4G connection, just like we do in cell phones. The carriers have been advertising, and their marketing engine is phenomenal about 5G everywhere. I mean, think of any commercial with Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, as the big three, if you will. Right now, the commercials are a little different, right? They're all, hey, get this, you get a free iPad and an Apple Watch, or, and I love how they present everything as though you're getting all this stuff for free, and that's not realistic. It doesn't exist. For those of you that are watching this or listening, there's no free lunch, because you end up paying for it in your service and everything else. But the idea, before the holidays and everything else, it seemed like every single commercial was all about 5G coverage everywhere. We have the best 5G coverage, this and that and the other thing. What I can tell you is that 5G, relatively newer technology, it's being embraced. There's a large number of products and companies out there, and I'll use Citrix as a perfect example. Citrix, which I think most of us that are probably involved in this industry are very familiar with them. 5G is not approved on their product set. It doesn't have as big a security. The 5G, I liken it to if you're setting up a home-based network or a network in a business, and you're putting in a Wi-Fi, and you have two options, right? And typically most people turn on both their 2.4 megahertz and their 5 gigahertz in terms of Wi-Fi within a facility. The 2.4 gigahertz is going to reach much farther. It doesn't have as much signal or as much bandwidth that can be produced over that, but it's a much more stable and consistent signal. And, you think about the fact that they've spent the last 8-10 years manufacturing and building that and continuing to improve that bandwidth that's within that. The 2.4, like streaming, I'll use my house as an example. My office is in the back corner of the house. My bedroom is on the exact opposite side, up a level, way over to the other side. Our big TV in our main room is, underneath the bedroom. When I'm running a 5 gigahertz signal inside, I had a lot more problems with streaming, where videos, like you were describing, they'll stop, they'll start. The interaction with them to fast forward, back up, make changes has a lot more delays and capability. But when I put it on a 2.4 gigahertz network, it's much more streamlined. I don't have those problems. It's the same in the difference really between 4G and 5G. Within that 4G LTE, currently within the industry, it's still about 85% of the networks around the world that are leveraging any kind of wireless technology. And I'll give you a couple of stats in a second that are really interesting. But the majority of the products that are still being built are all in 4G because it works, it's more stable, provides a more consistent connection for a longer period and a longer distance. 5G, we're messing with it. I mean, we'll see a 5G product in terms of our routers that are for fixed environments. We'll see that product set roll probably in Q2, maybe Q3 of next year. We've been testing with it. We've got a couple that we've been working with. And I can tell you, like from a throughput standpoint, again, where I describe in the cell phones, where you see you're just sitting in one physical location, you can watch your bars go from 2 to 3, back to 2, sometimes bounce up to 4, whatever. Nothing changed in my physical environment. My physical location didn't change. What did change is the access to the network. It didn't change how close I am to the tower because I'm still in the same position from that perspective. But based on capability, bandwidth, usage within those towers, it dictates the signal, and that's where you see a lot of fluctuation. Just like in any of the cable type products that we're providing from a business standpoint, back in the day when we were selling T1s and fiber, and you're still selling some of that out there today, but you could buy a dedicated connection that was, let's go back to T1s, 1.54 meg, which seems so small now. But we remember when we were able to operate an entire business off of 1 or 2 T1s, right? Yeah. So at the max, we were getting 3 megs. We were able to stream. We were able to do video calls. We were able to do all of those things. Today, when we look at cell phones and LTE, let's talk 4G first of all. With a decent connection, you're probably averaging somewhere between 8 and maybe 50 or 60 down, depending upon distance, the chip that you're using, or whatever that product set is that's connecting to that tower. That's light years ahead of where we were just, 5, 10 years ago where we were selling T1s. The instance in the 5G and the way they designed the technology is those towers are much different. The antennas that they hang in terms of pushing the signal, they honestly, if you look at cell phone towers today, the really tall ones, all of those that we see in the area, those are all 4G towers. The lower set that's lower on the tower that look kind of like pizza boxes, they're more like boxes, that's the 5G bandwidth that's pushing out. So where they say that there's a lot of 5G and a lot of 5G built, there is. And if you have the opportunity to be able to take advantage of it, that's fantastic. It can provide you faster bandwidths, but again, not quite as secure. And it's still a burgeoning technology that's not widely used across the U.S. and around the world. As we look globally, when you look at usage facts from the U.S. and you compare that to, say, Japan, China, a lot in the Asia-Pac region, it's funny, on my iPhone and I think even on the Androids, it tells you what your FaceTime was or your screen time was per day, right? And it analyzes, that tells you these are the apps that you're using and everything else. If you consider the time frame that we spend on our devices and connected to the internet, we're still only at about 40 to 50% of the capacity that we're seeing in the overseas markets and Asia-Pac and those types. They're using it a lot more than we are. And being able to depend on that, that's where that 4G really comes into play even more. And for us, from a business-to-business standpoint, our whole focus is making sure that you have reliable connectivity. It can move between multiple carriers depending upon the situation, even in a fixed environment, because there's not just one cell phone tower in the area. As we know, you just described it. Your wife has AT&T, I think, and you have Verizon. We see a lot of households that have done that, a lot of businesses that have done that too, because, hey, I don't have connectivity in every area within a metro area. A great example is a customer that we've got here in Colorado. They're a small local competitor in the windshield space, Colorado Auto Glass. We're finalizing a case study that we were doing with them for windshields. And we think, oh, you're just going in, replacing the glass, putting it together, you sign your form, they bill the insurance company, you pay whatever your deductible is and call it a day. It's gotten a lot more complex than that in today's environment because of all of the sensors that are built into all of these windshields. If you have automatic wipers, if you have all of these different things, there's sensors and things that are built into those windshields. There's more time that's required. The installation of the windshield is very important, obviously, so it doesn't fall out or come out. But then once you get it in, that has to actually be configured and assimilated to the car. They actually use tools to do this. Some of the lower end class companies don't do that, which is not going to allow that windshield to be able to work with the vehicle on any of those types of sensors and stuff like that. Colorado Auto Glass, they've got their own gear and they do probably 90%, if not 95% of their installations in remote locations. They do a lot of the rental car companies out by DIA. And their problem inherently has always been, depending upon where they're at in the metro area, they weren't able to get connectivity because when they're literally taking that glass and putting it into the vehicle and then assimilating it, literally locking it and integrating it into the car, the box itself has to communicate with the internet. They started with an AT&T and a Verizon hotspot, if you will, and they had multiple areas throughout the metro area where they knew that, hey, it doesn't work in these areas and different things like that. And so programming all the techs and the number of vehicles that they have and making sure somebody had the right hotspot or the right capability to be able to do that created a lot of problems. I've known Sabra, who's the managing director over there, for probably 20 years. And we were on a golf course and I had my puck and I was streaming music. I had everything connected. I had on my phone, because this golf course didn't have the little GPS thing, so I could tell where we were at, and besides using my rangefinder and all that stuff. And she was like, how are you doing that? I'm like, well, with this, showed her the puck. Mine looks a little different because we're testing some different skins and different things to create logo capability. But she was like, I need that for my company. And I said, well, great, let's give it a try. So we did an order for 3, and literally within 5 days, she called me and said, I need to retrofit all my trucks and all of my techs because this works. Ironically, yesterday I had to have my windshield replaced. And so I got a little one-on-one time with the tech, and I'm like, so how's this work for you? And he goes, he said probably 15% of the time, maybe 20% of the time, they weren't able to complete a job on site because they couldn't get connectivity. And since the introduction of the puck, they've had no downtime. So
That's a lot of money. That's a lot of problems too, because I've lived that life. I've worked for those types of companies. And if you're out there and you can't complete the job, it's not just that you can't get paid now and it's like, all right, well, we'll get it later. It's, I got to come back and I got to do something different. I can't connect. I can't work inventory from the road or whatever it is. The company has to pay for gas to go back, which is often a lot on these types of vehicles. They have to pay overtime to the employees. It's a lot of money.
yeah, and a lot of times the customer had to bring the vehicle to somewhere where they could connect, that they could actually do that with their devices. So you're not only taxing the individual, like the glass company itself, but now you're also taxing the customer because they have to take somebody out of whatever their normal day to day is in order to bring a vehicle over in order to finalize that. She estimated that with the downtime and the capabilities and all around, that could cost up to 20 grand a day from a business standpoint.
Yeah.
And so we've eliminated that problem for her and her company. And he was just like, yeah, he goes, I don't even worry about it. I turn it on and it works. And he goes, I don't care what carrier it is. It was the perfect, I wish I would have recorded it kind of like this because, it was just a great, quick snippet. He's like, I don't worry about the carrier. I don't care what it is. I just know I turn it on, it works, and I can get my job done. And at the end of the day, in this business to business environment, that's what's the utmost importance, right? With everything that's built today and the way everything is designed, the security behind physical SIM cards that are going into these routers or these devices, there's two problems with that. One is that you're locked into a particular carrier. The second is realistically, anybody who could have access to grabbing that SIM card could take that SIM card and put it into any other device, and you wouldn't know about it for days until somebody figured it out.
Yeah.
And there could be running up charges and doing all those other things. So there's a security risk inevitably in that product set, but we've tried to eliminate, I don't say tried, we've eliminated that problem and that issue currently. So, if it's not connecting to a particular network or it's not working correctly, the background, the AI and the algorithm are automatically looking at everything and it'll actually move and change carriers. It's been a number of times just sitting here, even in my office, and I watch my puck all day, and all of a sudden it will sense that there's a problem either with the carrier or the tower, and it'll automatically move it. And the line starts going up and down, telling me that, hey, I'm looking for a new carrier. And within 30 to 90 seconds, it reestablishes, and then I'm back online and I can use it doing everything I was doing previously.
I want to and apologize if I'm cutting you short.
You're good.
I want to make sure, because both you and I will tend to get into the weeds of the technical stuff because we love going there. But I want to make sure that we cover this, and not just this product, because you do a lot more than just, the Solus Light Puck, right? You have various other products that fit the same capabilities, but different use cases. And I definitely want to touch on those. But to summarize a couple other key points of this is the ease of use, the ease of management, and the flexibility of the pricing, right? So this has QR code right in the back. To activate it, all I did was turn it on. You wait till it connects to give you a very clear, easy to understand manual. Lights go good. Then you connect your phone, and it's that easy. When you scan the QR code in the back, it goes directly to see your usage. You're not logging into a password, forget this and that to find out what it was. You can see your usage there. You can see what carrier it's on. Very easy to navigate for the end user. But also, when you're talking about management across large geographic areas or even smaller ones like here on Long Island, across counties or even towns or locations, the management aspect from the back-end portal that will provide you all the analytics, the ability to set, all your configurations and things like that you need. You have visibility down to the per device use, as well as I think you could set it up by groups and like locations and things like that. So you have the ability to manage all these across the locations while not having to manage the individual carriers at each location. And I think that's an incredibly valuable and important thing to know. One of the other use cases that Mike was telling me about was during the unfortunate situation that happened, which is still going through recovery for a while, I think, is the floods and the hurricane that impacted the Carolinas. And you guys were saying how, Starlink is great. You can get that out there, but it's also still dependent upon weather, not as much as something like the LTE is. And you were shipping these down, which are obviously far more easy to transport and set up than Starlink is, especially when there's literal disaster everywhere and you have to worry about locations and stuff, and people are on the move. They're no longer stationary at a home. They're navigating back and forth and trying to get their lives back in order. You guys send some of these down there. So that's another great use case is as a backup and recovery.
We had two actually that I highlight from that. So one of them is one of my buddies is a director of nursing with the VA down out of Amarillo, and he was, well, I didn't know that anybody from the VA could be deployed, but it is all part of the government. So he was tasked and tagged with 3 of his people to do triage in Asheville. And he was leaving the next day. He called me and he's like, "Hey, can I take the puck? Can we use it out there?" I said, 100%. We beefed up the data because it was, I knew, I had a good idea of what they were going to have to do and what was going to happen and what they needed to be doing. So we beefed up the data on the puck. He went out there and with a team of 4 guys, that little puck will support up to 10 devices between their 4 cell phones. They had multiple tablets and multiple laptops that were connected for the stuff that they were doing. And they were in triage situations where they were working. Typically, in most cases, they were assigned in a particular area and running it just as we would think from a military perspective, anywhere from 24 to 48 hours straight. The only challenge they had was just making sure the puck was charged, but they weren't able to use their cell phones in a lot of situations. They had lackluster communication. They had the puck that they turned on. They were able to use all of their devices and communicate. They had 0 downtime. So you think in a completely torn up area, one of the very first communication strengths for services that's restored is the LTE. They roll in, towers, if they disappear because of hurricanes or tornadoes or whatever else. You'll see a lot of mobile trucks or different trucks that come in that actually can broadcast the signal and take care of those types of things. So that's one of the very early on capabilities from a deployment standpoint in terms of putting that out there.
Certainly before anything is underground, right?
100%. Yeah, they can actually go to where the tower was and they can actually connect to the feed and then build a temporary tower that typically comes in on a trailer or a truck, and then they can start broadcasting the signal so that it can be back up and running. And that's one of the very first that they actually work on in any of these areas in order to establish that capability and communication. Because it's not only important, well, it's very important, obviously, for first responders and stuff like that, because a lot of the signals and a lot of the technology that they're using today do leverage these capabilities. Another great example is another customer of ours down in Florida. He actually took a picture. He was deployed down there after the first hurricane. He got down there in time as the second one started to roll in. And of course, they had a lot of communications and stuff knocked out. So we set a couple of routers and pucks down there specifically for their use. And they work with auto companies and insurance companies on loss capability. They bring in these torn up destroyed vehicles and stuff like that, establish values with them and everything else. But a lot of that has to do with the back end and being able to communicate. So they've had a massive number of problems. They had no connectivity. We shipped those down there and they started working immediately. In fact, I believe the gentleman's name is Jason, and he sent us a picture actually attached to the puck. And it's one that went viral. A lot of people probably saw where there was a car going down the highway and there was this massive tornado that was probably about a mile off in the distance in front of him. And that was actually his picture. And he took it from his car and he was like, he texted us right away. He's like, "Puck's working, tornado, we're turning around." And that was, it was very interesting. And they were able to operate and do their business based on the capability where it was simple. They just needed to be able to plug it in. And with the pucks, they didn't, with the routers and with the pucks, they didn't have to. They just had to make sure they could charge those at night. So it gave them the flexibility and capability to be up and running, operate their business, do the things that they were doing. They're still obviously on the ground. They're going to be there for months in all of those locations and everything that happened from the flooding and the hurricanes and all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, that's, natural disastrous type situations. We're extremely happy that we were able to help. We actually sent out 50 pucks to partners and customers and families that were in those areas that were having problems communicating because they couldn't communicate. There were a lot of people that were still, we're talking a week and a half later where they still weren't able to communicate and people were still looking, hey, are they okay? Can we communicate with them? And by getting these in the field and putting them out there so that people could access them and use them, we were able to accomplish that and shrink that time frame massively so that people could communicate and let, family and loved ones, friends know that they're okay and what's happening and stuff like that.
It's really awesome. It's great that you can, tie, it must be rewarding for you, setting up to, being the tip of the spear here, leading this sort of charge and knowing that had it not been for what you're doing, they may not be, they'd be in a worse off situation than they clearly are already, unfortunately going through. So I'm feeling empathetically through you how that must feel. So that's awesome.
Yeah,
But
it was a great feeling, honestly. I mean, it's amazing to know that paying it forward. I guess that's probably a good way to put it. But being able to take care of that, help people. I mean, at the end of the day, yeah, we're all in business to make money and to take care of our families and our employees and all of those things. But it's times like that and dealing with those. And we've all been around situations. I mean, I think everybody throughout the country and around the world, we've all been tied to something that was a disaster in one way, shape, or form. A lot of things we take for granted that we can't access in those types of situations. We were able to help with that and be able to streamline that and let people be able to connect. So that was huge. And then businesses being able to resume their business faster than they would have if they were waiting for, power to be restored, connectivity to be restored. In stores and shops and stuff like that we're able to operate where generators and different things, and or with no power, but still be able to turn these on and make them work and take payments. And we've moved to pretty much a cashless society. We're continuing to move down that path, right? So, commenting with a friend recently in the last couple of weeks how it used to be the phrase was cash is king. Cash is no longer king. Now it's credit cards. I mean, and debit cards and some type of electronic payment.
Yep.
We put it in watches. We put it in our phones. We put it in every possible physical device. And at the end of the day, those have to connect to the internet in order to make any of that work.
It's funny when you're saying that, in sales, when you work at any organization. I mean, now that I'm on my own and I'm responsible for gathering these insights, but it's always, you get the word down from management to higher ups, and they're like, this event happened, go after it, get on top of it. And it's just like, this is the type of stuff you want to get ahead of, because while it is speculation, of course, and there's good grounds to suspect it, but digital currencies and things like that are going to be coming down the line. I think at this point, we're kind of beyond the point of like, oh, well, is it going to happen? It's more of like, when is it going to happen? To what depth is it going to happen? How fast is the transition going to happen? But it's always that, are you going to be positioned to capitalize on the opportunity as it's occurring and kind of get ahead of the pack in terms of your business being able to accept those payments and that sort of thing? Or are you going to be in the response and, repair mode? So it's like, important things to keep in mind when you're deciding on your connectivity, deciding on your backups, taking a look at your infrastructure. But on top of that, I want to make sure that we're not just talking about your hotspots here, because you do have more stationary devices that leverage the same technical capabilities from the SIMO and the vSIM, your routers, and you also have mobile connectivity for boats. You have wireless connectivity, right?
Yeah, so the three products, the Pro Connect is our standard router that we've got built. We'll start with that, like fixed wireless or fixed location. So our Pro Connect router has capability. You can run up to 32 devices wirelessly. It's got a WAN pass through. It can sit in line with everything else. And if the WAN fails, then it can automatically fail over. Kind of like a light SD-WAN product that will automatically kick in if your primary carrier connection fails. The next one that we've moved into, and this is where I think really we're carving a massive niche within the industry and going after a problem, is the IRG 655. So called the Internet Resource Gateway. Working in tandem with a company called Big Network, we helped to build and design a product set that actually has two of the vSIM modules that are built into it. So it will connect to two different wireless carriers simultaneously, as well as having multiple wide area network or, wired line carrier connections that can come into that, with handoffs that go all the way up to gigabit to internal networks. The purpose of that was we were looking at, I won't call out some of the competitors, but there's a multitude of products out there on the market today where they can do multiple SIM cards. You can pay anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000 for these devices. The problem innately in them is that they do have the capability to move from carrier to carrier, but it takes an instance and a push in order to do those types of things. And you've got somebody who's going out on site, plugging in SIM cards and checking to see which carrier is the best, and then lining those up and saying, great, here you go. Our product set with the capability to span between multiple carriers, utilizing the capability behind 2 virtual SIM cards that are literally in the device, and then the capability also to overlay for customers that need it, the ability to establish and provide them static IP anywhere basically is such a unique capability and prospect for us that as we get into those layers with customers, they're no longer reliant on a particular carrier or building a lot of BGP tables. And every time you add an IP address or make changes and anything from a dynamic and a static standpoint, and we won't get into the deep layers of all of that, but there's a lot of time and consumption that goes into all of those things. So we've solved that from a problem. And then, like you mentioned, there's the ability with what we call our surf and turf. And it was originally designed for marine craft, right? So close proximity, can pull an LTE signal up to 20 plus miles away offshore. We tested it in multiple environments, works great from that standpoint. And then we started testing it from a land-based perspective. And we're seeing the same thing. So it's the uniqueness. I actually have it mounted in my Jeep. So funny story was probably about 12, 14 years ago, I got into off-roading and Jeeping because I've been in this industry forever. I don't disconnect. My wife is not real happy about that most of the time. She's like, we've got to find a place to go and you've got to disconnect. And so I'm like, well, we've all been trained that every time your phone goes off or your light on your phone goes off or you get a buzz or whatever else, it's like Pavlov's dog, right? Just in this, I've seen my phone and trying every urge not to look over and go, oh, who's hitting me up? Fast forward to about 3 years ago and found out about this product set. 2 years ago, I mounted it in my Jeep, and now I have connectivity about 85% of the time wherever I'm at. And it's that surf and turf product that we've mounted in my Jeep so that I can have connectivity. It's unique. It's great from a transition standpoint. It doesn't work in every type of transport opportunity, but the same technology has a lot of capabilities across that. And yeah, there's a massive capability to any of those things that are close shore, near offshore, those types of scenarios, being able to create that and provide that capability and connectivity. We had one of our partners down in Alabama. This was probably about 3 months ago. He took one of his vendors and they went out deep sea fishing in the Gulf, and they were about 100 miles out, and all they had was their car. And ironically, nobody else had service on the boat. And I'm not saying that this is usual, but somehow, some way, for the majority of the day, they had connectivity 100 miles out off of a puck, and they were taking pictures and sending them home and sending text messages and doing all that stuff. I'm sure there was a repeater off of one of the oil rigs or something else that was out there, but where our technology worked from a data perspective, it worked really well, whereas cell phones and stuff like that, operating at a little bit different wavelength and capability, weren't able to connect. So yeah, it's unique. It applies to everybody. Always asks me, so what industries are you focused on? And I'm like, all. A lot of people don't like to hear that. And for years and years, in technology, it was always like, you want to be the easy button or, hey, we can do everything for everyone. We're kind of in that boat right now. I mean, honestly, not to tie it back to marine, but that's a realistic aspect for what we are and what we can do.
Yeah, I mean, listen, there's something to be said about being, a vertical specific, or I think a lot of the times it's the marketing that kind of focuses that. It's not always the case. Of course, there are, specific softwares that you integrate with or something like that, put limitations. But in reality, you're providing connectivity, which is applicable to any vertical, any industry, any use case where you need to connect to something out in the field. So yeah. I could see why you're fighting that fight against some folks that may not be understanding quite how you're positioning yourself. But I did want to get a quick time check here because I think we were only scheduled to 1:30 and we had a little trouble getting on together.
Yeah, that's fine. I think the one thing I would like to with partners when I'm introducing it, several things. So partners, if partners are watching this and you're like, oh, maybe we could sell that. We're 100% dedicated to the channel. We've got programs so that we can provide some of these. We've got some spiffs going on right now where you can get one with a 10 gig plan, which is like what we did with you. So you can take it, use it. This is for years and years and years in sales and sales trainings and everything else. You always had to create some kind of icebreaker with people, right? This is my icebreaker. I walk in, I set it down, and the light's on and people look at it and they're like, what is that? Like, well, that's a multi-carrier hotspot. They're like, that doesn't exist. I'm like, no, it exists, and there's no SIM cards. And I hand it to them so they can look at it and go through it. And, well, how does it work? I'm like, well, here, just connect to it. And I give them the Wi-Fi. They can connect to it. And they're like, wow, it works. I'm like, yeah. And I have not been on a public Wi-Fi in over 2 years. That I usually lead in from that. And as part of my icebreaker or even when I'm talking to people and individuals. I've done some speaking events and stuff like that. But my favorite question to everybody, and I'll give this to you, is and this is my own personal view on things, but what do you think is the number one drug on the planet right now?
The number one what?
Drug.
Drug?
Yeah.
Marijuana?
Yeah. So everybody goes to that, right? We think, in terms of drugs, marijuana, caffeine is probably, in terms of something that you're ingesting or taking, that's probably close to being number one. Marijuana, cocaine, all of those different things, right? I propose to everybody that the number one drug on the planet today is internet, because we've been so conditioned. I've known, like, if you leave your house without your phone, what do? You
Yeah.
go back to the house, get the phone.
Yeah.
I've known people that have missed flights because they forgot their phone. They forgot, they forgot a laptop. They forgot a notebook, whatever else.
There's the anxiety too. There's the withdrawal. There's that anxiety factor.
Immediately. You look at what we do with kids today, and like I said, overseas, where we're only at 40 to 50, maybe 60% of the usage that we're seeing in countries outside of the United States. It's embedded, it's ingrained in our DNA. I would say, it's taught, right? But you have to have it. You go into any restaurant, you look at any of the kids today, millennials going to a coffee shop, go anywhere you go, people walking down the street. It's interesting, like you see all these old movies and even new movies of people walking in New York City, or pick a major metropolitan area where people are walking and there's massive amounts of crowds. And how many of them do you see are using their phone, or they're on their phone, they have their earbuds in? The constant connection is something that we've created as a society and as a people, and it's global. If you take that, and that's the one drug that everybody has been introduced to for the most part, the minute you've touched it and you've seen it, they immediately grasp it and they want to know more and they want to access more and they want more.
Yep.
It's an innocuous type drug, but I throw that out there. And that's where businesses are at today. 15 years ago, I always told companies the lifeblood of your company is your phone system. And as of the pandemic, which made a massive shift and change in that, and with AI and all the things that are happening, and the auto attendants and the things that are now answering, and the smart auto attendants, those types of scenarios that are automatically running in the background, we don't have as much people interaction as we once used to, because we're relying on all of those. And that is the lifeblood, which all has to be connected to the internet.
That's an excellent way of putting it. I just literally saw, I think it was this morning or last night, there was an Instagram reel of it was a parenting channel, because I have a 6-month-old getting all these recommendations, but it was a mother who went to the store to disconnect their child's phone because they were being disobedient or something like that. And the kid was just losing it, like having a complete mental and total breakdown because they weren't going to have their phone. And that's unfortunately, while we're adults and we may not have that exact reaction, but on the inside, we have a little bit of that going on. And I'm not immune to it. I'm a big camper, outdoors guy. I'm surrounded by, this is my big lights. I have my power bank here for my camping and stuff. And I spend a lot of time in remote areas and stuff like that. And I can't wait to put this to the test and see what I can get out there. And some of those more remote areas, I go to Vermont all the time and go camping in an alpaca farm all the way up in the mountains. And I'm sure that I'm probably going to get way better service than I was with them. And for that matter, the nice woman's farm who we stay on, she was just bragging how she just got like the best internet like in town. And I'm like, well, here you go. Let's start talking about it, because she happens to work for the local college. And I'm like, well, maybe there's an opportunity there if you guys are having, trouble with the surrounding area. So these are the things that come to mind. Is she's got a tractor, she's got it out in the field and whatnot. I'm sure that's IoT connected, or at least it could be if she thought she can get the internet, right? But anyway, before we
computerized, right? At the end of the day, there's nothing being built that's mechanical today in terms of operational that doesn't have some type of computer that's connected to it.
Yeah.
We don't build cars like, my old 71 Chevelle that had no electronics in it, and it was points and distributor cap and all that stuff. And, you could make it run. Today, without a number of different computers and aspects that are in every single vehicle and every mechanized vehicle. And you even look at electronic bikes today. You look at the kids today that are using all of these scooters, and I guess adults too. But like in Denver, you go downtown Denver and there's all these scooters that you can rent. Those are all connected to the internet. Every
Yep.
single one of them, because you rent them right there on the spot, take it, drop it off, check out, and you get charged for it. It's a realization of society today. And so for us to be able to deliver these types of capabilities and delivery systems specifically to help businesses stay in business, stay connected, you can't get a circuit right away. Great. We can start this as a day one operation as a primary carrier circuit, and then flip into the background of being a backup. Those are the types of steps that we have and the opportunities that we're dealing with today.
Yeah, it's really awesome. It's very practical to talk about. I think we only have a few minutes here, and I don't want to touch on numbers, but I do want to talk a little bit about the pricing structure in terms of you having pool plans. And Mike was talking about, unlimited plans and throttle up and throttle down, and you guys do it a little bit differently. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so unlimited, there is no unlimited plan on the planet. I mean, everybody says, oh, I get unlimited from whatever, your cell phone carrier, whatever. There's a throttle point. I mean, if everybody got unlimited plans, then those companies wouldn't make any money. So we developed everything from basically a gig to a terabyte for a monthly service for a 1, 2, or 3 year contract within business, and then up to 25 gigs across the board. Every single device, we can create pool plans that would cover a multitude of locations. So it all rolls into a pool that they can pull from multiple locations. My biggest problem that I saw that I wanted to address in the industry is these massive overages that companies continue to get. I had an example of one customer at 10 locations, quick service auto repair type place, oil changes, stuff like that. We did the company I previously worked for, we did a complete installation with cameras and SD-WAN and carrier service and unified communications VoIP service for their phones, and a primary and a secondary connection, and it was failing over on a regular basis. Literally after the first month, when he got his second bill, he had a $10,000 overage on those 10 locations. And it was primarily 2 locations that flipped to wireless, and it just kept going. And it never failed back to the primary carrier. The second month, they had a $15,000 bill overage. We built systems in combination with SIMO, who built some of them, designed them, and we've been implementing them into our back-end systems from our customer portal, billing systems, and stuff like that to identify you sign up for a plan, that's how much data you get, right? If it's a pool, then you get that much data across your enterprise. When you're approaching the length or within 90 to 95% of your pool or individual device, it sends a notice to us and to the admin saying, hey, this device is almost at plan. Do you want to add more data to it, or do you want to just let it expire? And that's purely at the choice of the customer, and customers much prefer that. The majority of the product sets that are out there, even in the SIM card environment today, they don't lock them down. They sell them a plan, and then they just start billing as you continue to use with continued usage over the top of whatever you had signed up for.
Right.
And that's a major problem in the industry. And look, we're running a business, right? I know where my budget is. I know how much we're spending. These companies, every business has a budget. And they've established that budget. They're going to use X amount of dollars for whatever it is in different areas. And when they've said, this is how much I have for cellular service or wireless connectivity or what have you, then they're expecting it to stay relatively within that budget. And so we've created the capability to manage that and allow for overages if it's approved, as opposed to, just getting that $10,000 bill or whatever that looks like. Customer that's shocking. And they're like, the first thing is panic. How am I going to pay this? I don't have this in the budget. This isn't part of what I had planned. This isn't what you sold me. That's the other thing.
Right. Expectation.
Right. So you go through all 5 stages of grief and anger and right. And then it usually comes back to the rep, and you're like, this isn't what you sold me. And for years and years and years, that's always been the case. Is like, even back when we were selling phone systems, I remember taking a sheet in and saying, here's all the features that this phone system can do. And in that first section, it was always, these are the features that are included. And you never talked about that, or you're always taught, just sell that these are all the features. And then customers like, well, I wanted this feature. Oh, well, that's an extra upcharge. Everything was always an upcharge. So it's the same in the wireless industry. And we've gone to a point of developing these so that we can avoid that and be very upfront and be honest. I mean, I think that's the last piece is just,
it is. I mean, that's an advisor's nightmare. That's a worst case scenario for me. Everyone wants to talk about, I was just on a podcast earlier this morning where I gave my real thoughts on some stuff. So I'm waiting for the backlash on that. But it's an advisor's nightmare. This isn't like, great, I made the sale and helped them out and it was awesome. And then, but the worst thing possible is to get a call back where they're like, F you, this screwed me. This is the worst thing. I'm telling everybody about this. And you not only lose that customer, but then you got bad word of mouth, and then you start reputation damage. And then you start hearing it from people like me or whatever. But obviously that's not how you're set up. But it's awesome because if you have, I'm going to be working with probably for the most part more regional businesses throughout the East Coast. Yeah. But then, of course, I'm going to be working with businesses that have interstate, travel and stuff like that, because I do have a transportation and service-based industry focus. But if you have businesses that are in all sorts of different coverage availability areas, and you want to implement something like this across all your locations, because of course you don't want to be mixing and matching all the time. You want one solution that's going to be applicable across the organization, or else you're not really making it easier, right? But if you have a metropolitan area where you're crushing it in connectivity, but then you have the places that I was talking about on the LIE that's not so great, and then maybe you're out in the sticks of wherever it is, or somewhere completely rural in the swamps or something like that, where this is just no connectivity, and you want to make sure it works across that, but you're like, how do I price that? What you're saying is you pool the plans. So if there is any sort of issue at one of them, and not at the others, you can pull from those plans where you're not running into one location is costing you thousands and thousands of dollars. If you're not using it at the other one, you're still at that level playing field and not incurring those overages without getting throttled.
Right. And there's a balance in there, right? But yeah, again, looking at anticipated usage and where it could possibly be running, how you go about doing that, that's kind of where the magic and things come into play for us. But for us, again, being able to create that stopgap so that if you don't want to add more data, then great, you hit your data limit and you're done. I've argued, I've discussed, I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of people and a lot of partners, a lot of customers, and the unlimited just doesn't exist. I mean, again, back to the big three. I mean, they're doing a great job of saying this is how much we do, and it's unlimited. And go back to the unlimited talk, text, and whatever, and the family share plans, and all these other things was all ways to pool those things. They've got an algorithm, right? They've got all these things built in the background that they know that X amount of users are going to use this much. X amount of users are going to use this much. And then they create a throttle point in there so that if you hit that, yeah, you're still connected to the internet, but it throttles the bandwidth so greatly that it's not going to work. For us, even in those higher tiers, like if somebody needs a terabyte of bandwidth, they're getting a terabyte of bandwidth at the best possible speed that's available in that particular area with no throttling up until they hit a terabyte.
It's awesome. Straightforward, to the point, not no back end magic behind no Mr. Oz behind the curtains pulling the strings on you. It's you get what you pay for. So I like that personally.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, that was our goal, and we practice it and preach it every day.
Well, I think that's evident. You have an excellent way of explaining things. Definitely one of the analytical type personalities that I appreciate getting into the weeds with. It's also obviously great to know that the CEO of the company is driving on the product level that is involved in those things, and not just driving business decisions, but driving business decisions based off of the technical capabilities that are going to drive the outcomes that you want. So you have those two things connected. So I think that's great.
I appreciate it.
We are at the point where I'm going to let you close it out. I just want to let you know, I think we're coming up on time. So take the reins and close it out for us.
To just capsulize what you said there. I mean, for me, my focus has always been that, and I felt this throughout my entire career. Look, I have to be willing to do anything at any level within the organization. And I think every senior manager all the way up to the top, it's a problem. I mean, we've seen, what is it, the boss show or the undercover boss, where they go in and they had no idea because they weren't actually working in the business. And then they go in and they do some of these menial jobs and different things. For me, there's nothing within our organization that I'm not willing or capable or able to do. And I think that's unique. And I hope to always keep that in place. My focus has always been support my people, support our customers, take care of any of those things and be available. So, yeah, I'm always available. I mean, obviously I've got a staff of people that can help with any of these types of things and in working with that. But I was involved on a call today with a customer and focused on a lot of things. And they were like, wow, I didn't expect you to show up. I'm like, well, you're important to me. Like every customer, I don't care if it's one location or multi-location or whatever that type of situation is. If I'm needed, then call on me and I'll be there.
Well, I think you you might have pushed yourself out of your claim about the number one drug, because the only thing that can contest that would be money. And I think you're a smart enough guy and obviously hard enough working that if you wanted to easily become rich, you could do that without having to keep your hands in the fields covered in mud and grease. But you seem to find the satisfaction that comes along with that, which preserves the integrity of the business, because you could just scale that up to something else and get out of it if you wanted to. But it's clear that you like to be involved.
Percent. Yep. Work on this, work on my Jeep, work on other things. Yeah. Woodworking, golfing. I mean, a lot of passions, but yeah, it's, I appreciate the time. I look forward to working with you and all of our partners and customers, and really just creating a new focus within the industry. A lot of people say, who's your competition? And they always bring up the big carriers and stuff like that. And they're really not competition, they're coopetition, because we have to use them. We have to leverage their networks. We have to be able to do all of those things. We just do it differently than they're doing it, and allows us to be able to take all of those into the configuration and build those things. And at the end of the day, provide a reliable product that customers can use and know that it's going to be available, and help them run their business.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Tom. I greatly appreciate you coming on. I think we're going to have more to talk about, because I do foresee this being a core staple in a lot of the scenarios that I'll be dealing with. So hopefully we'll be talking about some client success stories soon.
Sounds great. Appreciate it, Daniel.
All right. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks. Appreciate it.